In the sprawling orbit of Nova Prime, humanity had carved a fragile foothold. Massive domes floated above the planet's storm-choked surface, connected by slender bridges of light and gravity. Among these bustling colonies lived Elias Carver, a quiet engineer whose life had become a routine of repairs, calculations, and muted greetings. He was not a man of grand gestures or bold adventures, but there was a gentle strength in him, a silent determination that even the storms above could not sway. Elias often wandered the observation decks, staring at the roiling clouds below. The storms on Nova Prime were unlike anything humans had encountered elsewhere. They churned with electromagnetic fury, tearing at the fragile machinery of the colony and sometimes swallowing entire districts in a week-long blackout. But it wasn't the storms that weighed on Elias's heart. It was the loneliness. Then there was Lyra Venn, a botanist responsible for cultivating the genetically engineered flora that sustained the domes. Her laughter, though rarely heard in the sterile corridors of the labs, had a warmth that could reach even the coldest corners of Elias's solitude. Yet she seemed always just out of reach, busy, distracted, and unaware of the quiet admiration that followed her through corridors and glass-paneled observation decks. One morning, as a violet storm wrapped itself around the colony like a living blanket, Elias was called to repair a damaged energy conduit in the biodome sector. The storm's winds rattled the transparent dome walls, sending electrical sparks dancing through the corridors. As he worked, he heard a voice, calm yet tinged with worry, calling over the crackle of alarms. "Elias, the oxygen regulators in Sector 5 are failing." It was Lyra. She had noticed the failing system while tending to her plants. Without hesitation, Elias followed her instructions, his hands moving over control panels, rerouting power and stabilizing oxygen levels just as the storm threatened to breach the outer shields. Lyra's eyes, wide with concern, met his for a brief moment, an exchange of silent gratitude that spoke louder than any words. That night, in the quiet after the storm, the colony hummed with restored energy. Elias found himself on the observation deck again, staring at the chaotic beauty of the violet clouds. Lyra appeared beside him, carrying a small tray of synthesized tea. "You always know how to fix things," she said softly, "even when everything seems lost." Elias nodded, unsure of how to answer. He wanted to say more, to tell her how her smile had become the rare sunlight in the storms of his life. But the words caught in his throat. He had always been a man of action, not of speech, and yet he feared that action alone could not convey the depth of his feelings. Days passed, and the storms came with increasing ferocity. The colony faced blackouts, communications failures, and occasional tremors that shook the very foundations of human persistence on Nova Prime. Through it all, Elias found himself drawn to Lyra's presence more and more. He would silently follow her to the greenhouses, quietly fixing broken systems, leaving small notes of encouragement tucked near her workstations. She laughed sometimes when she found them, brushing them off as quirky habit, unaware of the quiet devotion behind each gesture. One evening, a particularly violent storm forced an emergency lockdown. The colony's energy shields flickered, and the sound of whistling wind pressed against the domes. Elias and Lyra were trapped together in the control center, tasked with stabilizing the failing power grid. For hours they worked side by side, sweat on brows, hands moving in synchronized urgency. The tension of the storm outside mirrored the unspoken tension between them. Lyra finally looked at Elias, eyes searching his face. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she said, her voice breaking slightly under the stress. "You're always here when I need someone, even if I don't notice." Elias's heart surged. He opened his mouth to speak, but the storm's alarms drowned his voice. Instead, he offered a reassuring smile, the kind he had reserved for moments of silent courage. In that shared silence, something shifted, a fragile connection forming in the midst of chaos, unspoken yet undeniable. As the storm subsided the next morning, leaving trails of violet lightning across the horizon, Elias realized that his life had subtly changed. He had always been silent, an observer of life rather than a participant in its joys. But in Lyra's presence, even amidst the storm, he felt a stirring, a hope that perhaps the lost smiles of life could be found again, even in the harshest of worlds. And so, in the quiet hum of the recovering colony, Elias Carver made a silent promise to himself that one day he would bridge the gap between his silent love and the smile he longed to see, no matter how fierce the storms of life became. The violent storms of Nova Prime had become more frequent. The colony's shields groaned under the constant assault, and the air inside the domes carried a tense electricity, a silent warning that the planet itself was restless. For Elias Carver, every storm was a test of skill, patience, and endurance. But this time it would test more than that. It would test the limits of his courage and the depth of his silent love. Lyra Venn was already in the central greenhouse when Elias arrived that morning. Her brow was furrowed in concern, hands gently brushing over the leaves of her genetically engineered plants. Even amidst the chaos of storms, she tended to them with quiet care, as though the fragile green life could withstand any fury if nurtured properly. "Elias," she called without looking up. "The nutrient injectors in Sector 3 are failing again. If we can't stabilize them before the next storm, half the crops could die." He nodded, his eyes scanning the intricate web of pipes and conduits overhead. "I'll handle it. Don't worry." As he climbed the support scaffold, his hands moving deftly over the malfunctioning equipment, he noticed a faint tremor in the floor beneath them. The planet was restless, as though the storms were not enough. Nova Prime itself was testing the humans who had dared to call it home. Hours passed, the storm outside howling like a living thing. Elias worked tirelessly, rerouting power lines, repairing the nutrient injectors, and monitoring the fragile balance of energy feeding the greenhouse systems. Lyra worked alongside him, adjusting the delicate environment controls, her hands steady despite the tremors. For a moment they were silent, united only by the hum of machinery and the distant roar of the tempest. Elias stole a glance at Lyra. Her hair was damp from the misting systems, her eyes focused yet luminous with determination. In that instant he felt a surge of protectiveness and admiration. Without thinking, he reached out to tighten a loose coupling near her workstation. Their fingers brushed briefly. The contact was fleeting, yet it sent a jolt through him, a quiet affirmation that perhaps the distance between them could be bridged. Lyra looked up, startled, but instead of pulling away, she offered him a small smile. It was a fragile thing, but it lit up her face, a spark of hope in the middle of life's storms. The calm, however, was short-lived. A sudden surge in the colony's energy grid triggered alarms across the dome. Red lights flashed, and the automated systems issued warnings of an impending blackout. Elias's heart sank. The storm outside was intensifying, and the energy surge suggested that Nova Prime's magnetic fields were fluctuating dangerously. If the power went down, not only would the greenhouse fail, but the entire colony could suffer catastrophic damage. "Elias." "The main conduits," Lyra shouted, rushing to his side. He didn't hesitate. Grabbing her hand briefly to guide her to the safest pathway, he led her through the maze of scaffolding and conduits. Sparks flew from the malfunctioning circuits and the lights flickered ominously. Yet Elias remained calm, a silent anchor in the chaos, his mind racing with calculations and solutions. Together, they reached the main control hub. Elias immediately began rerouting power manually, his fingers moving over the touch-sensitive panels with precision born from years of experience. Lyra assisted, monitoring the pressure gauges and fluid regulators, her calm presence a grounding force amidst the storm's fury. Minutes stretched into hours. The storm outside battered the domes with relentless force, and the colony groaned under the stress. Elias's muscles ached, his hands were scorched by minor sparks, yet he did not stop. His focus was absolute. Every adjustment he made was calculated, deliberate, and careful, a testament to the resilience of human ingenuity. At one point, the greenhouse lights flickered dangerously. Lyra's hands trembled as she tried to stabilize the systems. Without hesitation, Elias moved beside her, placing a reassuring hand over hers. "I've got it," he said softly. No grand declarations, no dramatic speeches, just the steady certainty that she could rely on him. Her eyes met his, and in that moment, something shifted. Lyra realized that Elias had always been there, not as a hero in the stories of old, but as a quiet force of stability, courage, and loyalty. A man whose love was expressed not in words, but in action, in steadfast presence, in the courage to face storms that would crush lesser hearts. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the power grid stabilized. The greenhouse systems hummed steadily, the nutrient injectors working perfectly once more. Outside, the storm raged, but inside, a fragile calm returned. Lyra exhaled, brushing damp strands of hair from her face. Elias, I don't think I've ever seen anyone handle a storm like that. He shrugged lightly, attempting a modest smile. Just doing my job, and making sure you keep yours safe. For a moment, the vulnerability between them was unspoken yet understood. Lyra's lips curved into a genuine smile, the kind that reached her eyes and softened her usually measured demeanor. Elias felt something in his chest, an ache of longing, a surge of hope. That smile, fleeting though it was, seemed to shine brighter than any star in the orbit above. The storm continued to lash Nova Prime, but for Elias and Lyra, the tempest no longer seemed as terrifying. Together they had faced it, and in the process a bond had formed, one that did not need words to define it. Days later, the Colony Council issued a warning. The storms were no longer ordinary. Nova Prime's magnetic fields were shifting in unprecedented patterns. Some domes might not survive, and the human settlement faced a real threat of evacuation if the weather worsened. Elias felt a quiet determination settle within him. He could not change the planet, nor could he control the fury of its storms, but he could protect the people he cared for, and most of all, he could be there for Lyra. He began planning. Reinforcements to the shield generators, additional energy reserves, and contingency systems for the greenhouses. Each task he took on was done silently, methodically, and with unwavering resolve. And through it all, he remained in the background, allowing Lyra to shine while he ensured her world stayed intact. One evening, as the sun, or what passed for sunlight in Nova Prime's turbulent skies, cast a muted golden glow over the domes, Elias found Lyra again in the observation deck. She was sketching designs for a new hybrid plant, her fingers tracing the outlines with delicate precision. "You're always here," she said without looking up, her voice quiet and thoughtful. "I don't know how you do it. Always fixing, always protecting," silently. Elias hesitated. The words he had long kept locked away finally pressed against his lips, desperate for release. "Because I care," he said simply. "Because your smile, it matters to me more than anything." Lyra froze, pencil hovering above her sketchpad. Slowly, she turned to him, eyes wide with a mix of surprise and understanding. For the first time, the silent engineer had spoken the truth of his heart. And in the stillness, it felt like a fragile victory against the storm outside. The violet tempest of Nova Prime had not yet passed, and challenges would continue to rise like waves on an endless sea. But in that shared moment, Elias and Lyra had found a connection, a bridge across the storms, a light in the darkness, and a hint that perhaps life's tempests could reveal not only danger, but the hidden strengths of the human heart. And as the first streaks of calm touched the horizon, Lyra's smile lingered longer than before, fragile yet bright, a silent promise that even amidst the harshest storms, there was room for hope and perhaps for love. The storms of Nova Prime had reached their fiercest crescendo. Lightning tore across the skies like molten silver. Wind screamed against the domes with unrelenting fury, and the magnetic field fluctuations threatened to disable the colony's shields entirely. Every dome shook, and the hum of machinery was pierced by the wails of alarms. This was no ordinary storm. It was the planet asserting its power, testing the resilience of humanity itself. Elias Carver stood in the central command hub, eyes scanning the flickering displays. Every decision he made in the past weeks had led to this moment. The energy reserves were nearly depleted, and a single miscalculation could plunge the colony into darkness, destroying the greenhouses, power systems, and possibly lives. Yet despite the pressure, Elias remained calm. His mind was a fortress of logic, and beneath that a quiet, steadfast courage burned brighter than any warning light. Lyra Venn arrived moments later, rain-slick hair clinging to her forehead, eyes wide but determined. She carried a portable data module with the latest greenhouse diagnostics. Her plants were delicate, engineered to survive Nova Prime's unique conditions, but even their resilience had limits. "They're failing, Elias," she said, voice trembling with urgency. "If we don't stabilize the shields and reroute energy to the biodome arrays, half the crops could be lost before morning." He nodded. "We'll do it together." For the first time, they were not only colleagues facing technical challenges, they were partners in survival. The storm howled outside, but inside the hub, a focused determination united them. Elias guided Lyra through emergency protocols, hands steady on controls, while she monitored the energy fluctuations, adjusting parameters in real time. Then came the critical moment. A massive lightning strike hit the outer shield arrays, sending sparks dancing along the reinforced conduits. An energy cascade threatened to overload the main grid. Elias's heart raced, but he did not panic. He moved with precision, rerouting power, stabilizing circuits, and recalibrating the shield harmonics. Lyra assisted, her calm voice guiding him through the adjustments. "You're doing it, Elias. Keep it steady," she urged. Hours passed like this, each second a battle against the storm's fury. Sweat ran down Elias's face. Muscles burned, and his fingers were raw from the constant adjustments. Yet he did not stop. Every action he took was measured, deliberate, and unflinching, a testament to human resilience and ingenuity. At one point, a secondary surge caused the emergency lights to flicker. Lyra froze, a cable slipping from her hand. Without thinking, Elias lunged, catching it before it sparked against the floor. Their hands touched briefly, a spark of human connection that rivaled the storm outside. Lyra looked at him, eyes wide, and for the first time the fear in her gaze gave way to trust. "You're incredible," she whispered. He offered a small smile, though it was tired and streaked with grime. "We have to be here." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the system stabilized. The shields hummed steadily, energy flowed evenly, and the biodomes were secure. Outside, the storm's intensity slowly waned. Nova Prime's violet skies were still turbulent, but the worst had passed. For a moment, Elias and Lyra stood in silence, letting the calm settle over them. The adrenaline drained, leaving only exhaustion and relief. Lyra turned to him, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the restored systems. "Elias, you saved us. You saved the colony, and the plants, everything." He shook his head, brushing off her praise. "I just did what had to be done. You were here too. We did it together." She smiled, a full, genuine smile that lit her entire face. Elias felt his chest tighten. This smile, the one he had quietly cherished from afar, was no longer distant. It was here, tangible, alive. And in that moment he realized that love did not always need grand gestures. It could grow quietly, steadily, through shared struggles and unwavering presence. As the hours passed, the colony began recovery operations. Repairs were underway, and messages of relief and gratitude echoed through the command channels. The humans of Nova Prime had survived the storm, and though fatigue weighed heavily on everyone, a renewed sense of unity and hope spread among them. Elias and Lyra found themselves walking through the biodomes, inspecting the plants and ensuring the nutrient systems were functioning correctly. The storm outside had left the air clean and sharp, carrying a faint electric tang. Lyra reached out, brushing her hand over a leaf, then turned to Elias. "You know," she said softly, "I think I've been looking for something all this time. I didn't realize it was right in front of me." Elias's breath caught. He had longed to hear those words, though he did not dare hope. "What's that?" he asked quietly. Her smile deepened, and for a moment the storm's memory faded, leaving only warmth between them. "Someone who's always here. Someone I can rely on. You've been that for me, Elias." For the first time, Elias spoke without hesitation, without fear of rejection. "Lyra, and I've cared for you for a long time. Silently, yes, but deeply. Your smile, your courage, they mattered to me more than anything." Lyra's eyes glistened with emotion. She took a step closer, closing the distance that had always lingered between them. "And I think I've finally noticed," she said. "Not just noticed, Elias. I feel the same." In the midst of Nova Prime's lingering storms, two hearts found each other. Words were not needed to explain the depth of their bond. It had been built through shared struggle, unwavering courage, and silent devotion. Days turned into weeks, and the colony slowly stabilized. Nova Prime's storms remained unpredictable, but humanity's resolve had proven stronger. Elias and Lyra worked side by side, their partnership no longer silent. Together, they planned improvements to the colony's infrastructure, creating systems designed to endure even the harshest tempests. And in the quiet moments, when the skies cleared and the violet clouds gave way to muted sunlight, Elias and Lyra would walk through the biodomes. The plants thrived under Lyra's care and Elias' careful attention. But more importantly, the human heart thrived, their hearts intertwined, proving that even in the middle of life's storms, hope, courage, and love could flourish. One evening, As the last remnants of a storm faded, Lyra leaned against Elias, watching the distant horizon. "You've always been my calm," she said softly. "And you've always been my light," he replied. In that shared silence, the storms of Nova Prime seemed smaller. The trials they had faced, nothing compared to the bond they had built. The planet would rage again, storms would return, but now Elias and Lyra were ready. Not just to survive, but to live together and to find joy even in the most turbulent skies. The human spirit, resilient and courageous, had proven itself once more. In the middle of life's storms, a silent love had found a lost smile, and in doing so illuminated the enduring strength of humanity. Nova Prime would continue to challenge them. Yet Elias and Lyra knew one truth above all. Storms, no matter how fierce, could never extinguish what was built through trust, courage, and quiet devotion. And so with